Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another podcast. Today, we are going to be looking at the last chapter in the first year curriculum, and that is the Reformation, when the Catholic Church split up into the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church. It's a nice, short, and easy chapter with only one main key personality and a couple of things to learn off. So, let's get right into it and start learning. So, why did the Reformation begin? Well, the Reformation began for four main reasons. The first one was the influence of the Renaissance. So, the Renaissance influenced the Reformation and the Age of Exploration. The printing press was invented around this time, and the printing press helped make things more readily available for people to read. So, things were, instead of being handwritten each book, you were able to print multiple pages a day and make books an awful lot faster. This also meant that you were able to print books in different languages, so people were able to read. And then finally, the abuses and the wealth of the church really annoyed people, mainly our key personality, Martin Luther. So, the main four abuses are simony, nepotism, absenteeism, and pluralism. And you can remember these by the anagram SNAP. Okay? So, simony was selling and buying church positions. So you would come in and you could say, oh, the person who gives me the most money will be the next priest. Nepotism was giving the position to your family member. Now, bearing in mind that all these priests, bishops, even popes shouldn't have any sons, but a lot of them did, and they would give their sons these high up positions. Otherwise, they would give it to cousins, nephews, etc. Absenteeism and pluralism go together. Absenteeism is where you're not there for your congregation or the people that live around the church. And this is because you could be also partaking in pluralism, meaning you had more than one job. So you could be a priest in 3 different areas, but obviously you could only be in one area at one time, leaving one or more areas without a priest or a bishop or a cardinal, whatever position you may be. The last abuse, and this is the one that really ticked off our key personality, Martin Luther, was the sale of indulgences. So, indulgences were like tickets, and the more of these tickets you had, the faster, quicker, higher up in heaven you would go when you died. So, this meant that people would spend money in this life, on this earth, to buy these tickets so that when they died, they would go straight up to heaven to be with God. And Martin Luther saw this and said, that's not how it works. And this led to him writing the 99 Theses and hammering them to the church door in Wittenberg. Now, 2 key things that we need to know about Martin Luther. First of all, his name is Martin Luther. It's not Martin Luther King, okay? Martin Luther was a German white man born in the 16th, 17th century. And Martin Luther King was a black American born in the 20th century. Okay? So, 2 very big differences. If you write Martin Luther King in an exam, you will not get marks for that. Okay? So, you could get a potential 3 marks for naming a reformer. You would not get any if you say Martin Luther King. Okay? Now, the second point to make about him is questions that are usually asked is name a reformer, so Martin Luther, and then let's look at 4 key things that they did in their lifetime to make change. Okay, so the first one would be his anger towards the sale of indulgences. That's point 1 for us. Point 2 was how he received a papal bull, which is a very important letter from the Pope, asking him to take back these outlandish things that he said, 99 of them, and to take them back and to go back kind of, in the flow of the church. And Martin Luther said no. And how he said no was he burned the papal bull in public. Okay? He was then given a second chance. This is point 3. And that second chance was where he was called down to Worms. Worms is a place in Germany. I know, such an attractive name. Where do you live? I live in Worms. And here there was a meeting, which is known as the diet of the worms. Okay, so not a diet in that we're eating them, but a diet in that it was a meeting. And here he was asked by high ranking church officials to take back his statements, and if he didn't, he would be excommunicated, which means he would be expelled from the church. He said no, and he was expelled from the church or excommunicated. This then led to the Edict of the Worms, and this made Martin Luther an outlaw, where he could be hunted down and killed for money. So, leading on to point 4, a prince in Germany who was friends with Martin Luther and believed in what he said and what he wrote decided to sorta kidnap him and keep him in his castle where he would be safe. So Martin Luther spent the rest of his days in this castle where he translated the Bible from Latin into German for more people to read, and he continued to preach and teach about his new form of Catholicism, which became known as Protestantism, or being a Protestant. So these are the 4 main points that you can write about for Martin Luther, okay? The next question that you can get asked, and the next thing we need to know is, we need to know the differences between being a Catholic and being a Protestant. So, if you are a Protestant, you believe in faith alone, which means that your faith alone, praying, going to church, this will all lead you towards heaven when you die. Whereas the Catholic Church believe in faith and good works, and good works would be considered giving money to the church. In the Catholic Church, there are 7 sacraments, and in the Protestant Church, there are only 2. In the Protestant Church, clergy can marry, and clergy can be men or women. So you could have a woman minister or you can have a man minister. And the way I always remember this is, if you've ever seen The Simpsons, Reverend Lovejoy is married to Helen Lovejoy, and that's because they are Protestant, because he is allowed to marry. Whereas Catholics, they are only allowed to be men and they cannot marry. Then the last one to remember is that in Mass for Catholics, Latin is used. Now, this went away about 100 years ago because they kind of realised that actually maybe we should speak the language of everyone else. But up until then, Mass was in Latin, whereas Protestants spoke their language in Mass. So whether that language was Spanish or English, German, French, and this became known as speaking in the vernacular. And vernacular means your own language. Now, if you want to look at more of these differences on the YouTube channel, if you look up Protestant versus Catholic, you will see that I have a video all about the differences between being a Protestant and being a Catholic to help study. So do go check out Miss O'Moore on YouTube, where you can find this video along with lots of other study materials. Now, we have other reformers that we can talk about. One being Henry VIII in England, where he made England into the Church of England. And we have John Calvin from Switzerland, who made the Church Presbyterian. But I wouldn't recommend writing about these two, because unless you have an extreme detail of knowledge about these two to write 4 points, you're not going to get the full marks, okay? So just to note that there are 2 others that you can talk about, and obviously if you and your school have gone into detail on them, please do look at them, write about them. But if you've looked at Martin Luther, just write about Martin Luther. Now, how did the Catholic Church respond to the Reformation? Obviously, they're not going to be happy because people are leaving the church. So, 3 main things were set up as a counter-reformation to stop the spread of Protestantism. The first one was the Council of Trent. The Council of Trent was a council of all different priests from different parts of Europe, and they decided to bring in new rules to create more discipline for the church. The first of these rules was to get rid of our abuses, so SNAP, which is simony, nepotism, absenteeism, and pluralism. They also brought in stricter rules about prayer and other things for daily life. The second thing that they brought in was the Jesuits. The Jesuits were set up and they would spread religion throughout the world, where they would go on missions, set up monasteries, teach the locals, and help spread Catholicism to the world. They also set up a lot of different schools. So many schools in Ireland, England, and in fact all over the world would actually be Jesuit schools. And these have a rich history and a rich connection to the order of the Jesuits. The last Counter-Reformation thing that came about was the Inquisition. Now, the Inquisition was there to crush Protestantism, mainly in very Catholic countries, such as Spain and Italy. This was all over Europe, but Spain and Italy are the main two countries that it took place in. And this basically created a sense of fear for people that would be considering moving to being a Protestant. People would snitch on one another and say, oh, that person is a Protestant. And loads of different punishments could take place, such as being locked up in the stocks, being made to wear a red tunic to show that you were a traitor, or you could be locked up in jail and sometimes even killed. This is one of the darker elements of the Counter-Reformation, but it still happened nonetheless. Now, the outcome of the Reformation is nice and easy. So obviously we have different religions now, okay? So please make sure that you state that. Obviously we have Martin Luther's Protestantism, we have John Calvin's Presbyterianism, and Henry VIII's Church of England. Okay, then we have different types of architecture within different churches belonging to these different religions. Don't worry too much about that one. And then, of course, education became very different. Schools were set up to help teach people this particular type of religion, whether it was Presbyterian, Catholic, Protestant. And then, last but not least, religious wars broke out. So you had different sides saying our religion is the true religion, no, ours is, and fights broke out. And of course, one of the main ones that we can think of in Ireland is, in fact, the fights up in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. So the Troubles, obviously, you will learn about later on in the curriculum, but that was a big fight where Catholics and Protestants fought over what they thought was the better religion. Now, there was a lot of politics involved there, but if you were naming a religious war, you could definitely name the Troubles as one in Ireland. Okay, guys, that is the Reformation visited in 12 minutes. I hope you enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, and comment anything else that you need to learn. And I will see you again for another podcast. Bye!